Hello one, hello all. It's the gothiest ghost of them all, Casp in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Ka, the Thief Next to Jesus. This is the final album from Brooklyn underground legendary rapper Ka, who unfortunately passed away this October, and has put out a plethora of fantastic records, such as Knight's Gambit, Honor Killed the Samurai, Orpheus vs. the Sirens, albums that were immensely conceptual, very thoughtful with a lot of creativity, great storytelling. And when it comes to Ka's vocals, they've never been overstated. They've pretty much been understated throughout his career. So with that being said, Ka is pretty much the equivalent of Killing Him Softly. And I feel like his production choices are far from dull. And yes, they're not fast-paced or anything like that. They're actually very spacious, entrancing, beautiful at times, grim at times. They're expressive, but they're also not visceral. And given the lyrical content here, it makes it even more powerful, very eerie, very grim, very unsettling, very foreboding, as he speaks on life, religion, his views on culture, society, poverty, death, slavery, racism, and the tie-ins to religiosity. And what makes this thing creepy is how spiritually driven this album is. But not only that, but how much of his lyrics were a precursor to what was in store for him, what was to come. And this is the last thing he put out before leaving this earth. And yes, this is my first time reviewing Ka formally. And not to make this about me, because it's not. But what's sad is this is the first time that I'm reviewing an artist whose catalog I absolutely love. And this is also the last album that he put out. Also, there's no features here at all. Ka is doing it solo. He's taking this whole thing on his own. And honestly, I feel when it comes to solo, that's where Ka really puts out his best. His latest trajectory, while not terrible, I'm not exactly in love with it, with the exception of this album. This album's great. And there were highlights on the last record he put out, the double album he put out, but I don't think it was one of his best. Not one of his strongest. I feel like whenever I listen to Ka, I am listening to a rapper who takes something minimal and creates something vast with it. And I know minimalism isn't for everyone. The Drumless production is not going to be for everyone. But I at least want people to respect it. I want people to listen to what this album offers. And as I go deeper into this review, I'll explain why. Mostly due to the focus that Ka puts into a record. I feel this new LP, The Thief Next to Jesus, really showcases that, and showcases it very well. And the hip hop he's brought over the years has been cold, creepy. There have been moments of something epic going on, something beautiful going on with the production. There's also a lot of pain, depravity, and harrowing going on with his lyrical content, but also something philosophical to his pen game too. He speaks on much recollection, but the bars here definitely do show some observation of other lifestyles too, other people's experiences. So he has always been a writer, a poet, but also a reporter in terms of his artistic trajectory. So he's sharing views of immediate events, past events, and while he does speak on religion, he is very critical of it. Like, I'm trying to decipher if he's become an atheist or not, or if he was an atheist. But it is pretty clear that he was becoming a skeptic. It, in a way, kind of reminds me of Tupac with the Machiavelli album, how there was definitely a touch of on the fence agnostic lyricism going in when he spoke on God, or is God like this big bully or tyrant? Is this all really worth it? Which becomes very apparent on the song Fragile Faith, because he was finding things questionable, questioning the beliefs, not a very strong belief in a higher power, and the looseness coming from hardships, oppression, and conditions that Ka has encountered, along with the contradictions as well. And listening to Ka for numerous years, it's very evident that he's gone through a plethora of tumultuous experiences. Not to mention the racial aspect, the racist aspect and oppression that has been enacted of people of color. And while Ka does not have a watertight sense of faith here, and not the strongest belief in a higher power, he certainly does keep things based in religious proportions, and a very laser-focused view on it. And this isn't really a watershed moment for Ka. He's spoken on religion in the past. And after the track, he brings more religious correlations, more vocal samples, more gospel samples, but also a bit of religious interviews as well, like sample bits of it, audio bits of it, in regards to religion and how racism was attached to it through slavery, leading to systemic racism, people of color losing faith in God, not to mention these song title tie-ins to religion, notably Cross You Bear, Him and I. What Ka brings to this album lyrically is very cerebral, very confessional, very heartening too. With bars like, "You write this rough and tonight's a draft." Like, Ka, again, is not one of those rappers who projects his voice, or animated at all. Like, his voice doesn't have to be accelerated, it doesn't have to have projection, and it doesn't really need to be animated for you to feel what he's saying, or for me to feel what he's saying, and for me to be moved, especially on the track Tested Testimony. That gets me choked up diving into the lyrics, especially with how powerful they are. Ka to me is a rapper that will give you a story or an observation that tells what's in his mind and puts his heart into it, or vice versa. Also, I feel the feelings, the thoughts are definitely bolstered by the production. The production really does give life to Ka's words, Ka's devastating lyricism. I feel like they aren't blasting or knocking. It's not like boom bap, trap music, or drill, or anything like that, or even experimental. Although there is definitely some abstract to what's going on in the production. It's really well crafted, instrumental, minimal, sample-based music, which honestly makes the religious aesthetics more engaging. Like on the opening track, which has these muffled but sharp bass arpeggios that consistently play through the track, the watery guitar embellishments with some bright chord arpeggios. There's definitely a lot of composition to this track. And sure, you could argue it does kind of read as broadcast, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality. But while I will say these are observations I semi-agree with and semi-don't, I can't deny how clever he took these observations and critiques and made different refrains with it per observation, per critique. And also I must say, Ka does practice what he preaches on here, because while he's saying hip-hop needs a change, he is also adding to that change. I feel he added to that change on here, and with the topics he's discussing here, I didn't hear any contradiction whatsoever to what he was pushing against. So he does create a conceptual dichotomy amongst his contemporaries. The song Beautiful has these very raw audio set of samples. Like, it's so raw, it feels like I'm in the recording. There's a little bit of distortion there, and I love the sonic pacing, of the bass, drums, the organs, and how the light pianos play out. It's like there's a suppression of instrumentation, and then it bounces right back as the track continues, going from a low frequency to a high frequency. It's very subtle, but it's definitely something I picked up on. I feel this is one of those instances where Ka has really shown to be a creative. He has always shown himself how to keep the audience locked in, whether it's sonically or lyrically. And in this case, it's a little of both. A lot of both, actually. Because this track does have sonic intricacy, and that's very haunting. But also the lyrics are very unsettling as well. And the track does these false fade-outs, which I really enjoy. I feel that also gives emphasis and attention to what Ka is saying, where Ka is essentially saying he wishes people who endure disdain, loathing from society, that Ka wishes them the best, wishes they live long, beautiful lives. Also, Ka speaks on his life as well, also speaking on contributing and donating to those lesser fortunate, those in poverty, of impoverished communities. But the eerie part of this track is him speaking on his passing, and evidently he's very alive here, having no knowledge of him leaving this earth, at least I don't think so. At least not that we know of. Saying lines like, "When I part they grieve, mark the earth I leave," and then has this chanting group vocal of "beautiful." It's vastly creepy, but also very powerful as well. I feel these sentiments also land well and are also very well executed on the track Borrowed Time. Instrumentally, as I mentioned before, they definitely do grab me and give me that religious experience. The song Collection Plate has these glimmering strings over these pulsating bass notes that are complemented with these ascending expressed vocal samples. The whole thing feels like I'm living or having an outer body experience. Like, I feel like I'm levitating on the darkest night and I'm just ascending into a light. I'm just seeing everything as I'm floating up to this afterlife, this bright sky. The trembling bass, the wailing organ samples, the vintage guitar arpeggios on the track Cross You Bear are very tension building and great. I love how Ka continues to show his wordplay prowess of the phrase "cross you bear" when he's speaking on a very unpleasant circumstance, a plight if you will, as someone has bestowed this onto themselves. And also this plot brought by systemic racism, that being the main plight, which has been brought through the religion, and stating he hopes the mutiny and propaganda that one has portrayed onto the community, that it's worth it, that their sacrifice is worth it. And there's so many friggin' layers to this. And the cross being not only the unchanging damage, but also the cross in a proverbial sense and a literal sense. But also you could take this as the betrayal and the symbolism of a cross as in betrayal, but also a cross as in a proverbial cross, or a cross as in a physical cross as into religion. I'm also digging the track God Undefeated. I really love the sudden shots of sharp organ chords, the quick but evocative gospel vocal bits that are throughout the track. The final track is probably one of the most disturbing tracks on the whole entire record, and probably one of the most disturbing hip-hop songs I've probably heard all year, that has these cycling vocal loops. And I believe to be a woman screaming in terror, I'm not exactly sure, with a very eerie set of droning chords. It sounds like something out of a religious horror movie. And I feel like Ka really wanted the listener to have that experience. Like, he really wanted to give you a ending, a closer that gets instilled in your memory. And it's crazy how many cringy rappers there are who talk about religion and make the cringiest music, with the exception of rappers who do put religion into their music but make it interesting, make it compelling, such as Blue, Kendrick, McKinley Dixon, because they put it into their lyrics, but they also have a purpose to it. But what's even more powerful about this track is how this is the final track on the album. This is the final track that Ka left us with. And the words here got me really, really teary-eyed when I dove into them. Like, I sweat blood, I shed tear for you. And before that, saying I'm here for you. And how each bar he mentions is just so poetic, talking about his upbringing, his legacy, and what he's done with the art. He was in it to uplift, he was in it to send a message. This was something, a goal that he wanted to accomplish. Speak his mind, his thoughts, and really showing how much of a gifted penman he was. And again, it's crazy, he does not raise his voice. He does not have a high pitch. It's very smoky, it's kind of quiet. But his words and production choices bring so much feeling and volume that I feel I can't stress enough. And if this is your first introduction to Ka, please go back, listen to the early discog, because it's fantastic. There are other tracks on here that I love, like Lord Have Mercy, as Ka is speaking of the observations of people who are in poverty and taking steps out of poverty, or at least trying to take steps out of poverty and getting into dangerous lifestyles as a result of that. And Ka is speaking here from a very journalistic aspect, due to the thirsty, the starving making these moves, this life that he lived before, which is depicted to them as a life of sin, and they're asking for mercy, for repentance for their actions. It's truly a very deeply layered track, and probably has one of the most gentle, beautiful piano lines on the whole record. Such Devotion probably has the most dramatic vocal samples on here, the most dramatic gospel samples on here that almost sound anthemic, as Ka is speaking on his undying devotion, speaking on being aware of these sinister actions, being aware of these sinister systemic plots against the Black community, and hoping his work pays off, that he helps people in his community, and how devoted he was to that success, that prosperity, not only to aid his community, but also to uplift, establish a name for himself in rap and the art. The song Him and I is another highlight for me that topically reminds me of such devotion, or even further back to Knight's Gambit with Nothing Is. How it shows Ka has always had devotion, ambition to being the best at what he does, to making it in what he does, to being successful in what he does. Reflecting on past life, what he wanted to achieve. He wanted to be successful but be close to his people. Going back to the days of struggle, the contradiction of religion. So this to me I feel was a flashback, a introspection, a reminiscent type track, which is very fitting for this album. As far as complaints go, there's not a lot. I mean, the album is great, it's fantastic. And through Ka's catalog, he's been very stone-faced, but still has lyricism. There's still feeling in his lyricism, meaning in his lyricism, and also production that works so well with him. He's easily a no gimmicks type of rapper, but I'm curious to know, and I guess we'll never know what happens next, what the next move would have been. Like, we'll never know what a vocally expressive Ka would have sounded like in terms of volume or performance, but honestly, I don't think Ka was about that. Again, I feel he was just about killing them softly, destroying subtly. But for gems in Ka's catalog, this is certainly one of them. And when it comes to concept albums, he's nailed a lot of them with how much of a creative, a wordsmith, and focused he has been on these records, how much of a talent and storyteller he was. And if you're an album person, like me, I implore you, I endorse the idea to go back and listen to those records. And it could be a step out of your wheelhouse, but if you're a fan of MF Doom, Rock Marciano, I see no reason that you would think this is a big step in terms of trying something different or something out of your comfort zone. So it shouldn't be that hard to get into. But yeah, I feel through Ka's discography, he's given us this great style that he himself is knowledgeable of in terms of his influence, as he stated on this very record. And when you take the time to listen to his lyrics, look into his lyrics, how layered and clever they are, one after the next, how gripping the message is, and the feelings you're receiving from them, not to mention the fantastic creativity, the thematic focus that he has lasered in on. And throughout his whole entire catalog, I feel this is certainly his best record. And I'm not just saying that because this is his last record. I'm not just saying that because he passed. I truly and honestly think this is his best record. And it's a shame because I really don't know, none of us know what could have came after this. But due to how grim and foretelling this album is, I feel that adds more to the density of feelings and just the power of this album. I'm feeling a 4.5 out of 5 on this. If you've given this a listen, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? I'm Caspa. I'm your plug. Hit me with a sub. Caspa, R.I.P. Ka. Till we meet again.